I was holding her hand when she cried and told me she was dying. My older sister, Brielle, always had a way of taking up all the oxygen in the room. But that day, she looked so small, so fragile. She said the doctors gave her a year, maybe less. Stage 4 lymphoma. Her voice cracked as she asked me to keep it a secret from the rest of the family. She couldn't handle the pity. I didn't ask for proof. I didn't need to. She was my sister, so I paid her rent. I covered her credit cards. I sold my engagement ring and drained my savings. She said the treatments were experimental and not covered by insurance. I believed her. God, I wanted to believe her. I spent my nights crying in the dark, praying she'd beat it, that she'd live. Meanwhile, she sent photos of the fourth bags, hospital beds, and blurry selfies and gowns. Turns out Google Images is a hell of a resource for the creatively vile. I didn't see the cracks until much later. She always had an excuse for why I couldn't come visit her at the hospital. COVID restrictions, new policies. Too tired from chemo. I swallowed every excuse like communion wine bitter, but holy. Our mom, ever the narcissist, suddenly wanted to connect with Brielle again. That should have been my first red flag. Mom never wanted anything to do with us unless she could benefit. But I was too busy saving my sister to notice the noose tightening around me. My credit tanked. I missed rent twice. My boyfriend of 4 years left, saying he couldn't compete with the ghost of someone else's tragedy. Then came Christmas Eve. I showed up at our mother's house with the last of the presents I could afford, only to be greeted with raised eyebrows and silence. The kind of silence that tastes like metal. Mom opened the door halfway, arms crossed. "We thought you weren't coming," she said flatly. Brielle appeared behind her, flushed and glowing, not pale and sickly. She was wearing a full face of makeup, sipping champagne. "I didn't want you to find out like this," she said. "But I'm in remission. It's a Christmas miracle." Everyone cheered. I stood there, clutching a wrapped candle and a tin of cookies I'd baked, because I couldn't afford real gifts. They popped bottles. They took group photos without me. Brielle made a toast about fighting through darkness with the light of family. No one looked at me. Mom offered me leftovers in a Tupperware and asked if I could leave soon. "We don't have enough chairs." I sat in my car in the driveway, watching them laugh through the window, and something inside me finally broke. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just drove away and started planning. First thing I did was stop all the payments, the automatic transfers, the credit line I'd co-signed, everything. I changed my phone number, blocked everyone. Then I contacted a friend of mine, a tech-savvy coworker, who owed me a favor after I covered for his screw-up at work. "Can you find out where my sister's been? Like, really been?" It took less than a week. The photos were incredible. Brielle on a yacht in Capri. Brielle drinking wine at a cooking class in Tuscany. Brielle ziplining in Costa Rica with a hashtag YOLO, #WanderQueen. All time stamped within the same month she was supposedly in chemo. I scrolled through her posts, each one a knife. That BTCH had blocked me from her public socials, but forgot her Pinterest. Amateur mistake. I compiled everything: screenshots, dates, captions. Then I found the GoFundMe, $23,860 raised. I submitted a fraud report to the platform, then to the IRS, then to her bank. And finally, I emailed the folder to every family member who had clapped for her at Christmas with one sentence: "Here's the miracle." Then I deleted the email and went to sleep for the first time in months. The fallout was nuclear. My cousin called in tears. My aunt left a voicemail sobbing. My mom, she sent a voice message that started with, "You spiteful little snake," and ended with, "You'll die alone." But Brielle, she sent nothing. Her social media went dark. She vanished. And for once, I didn't chase after her. 3 weeks later, I got a certified letter from a law firm representing GoFundMe. They were pursuing criminal charges. I grinned so hard I thought my face might crack. When the investigator contacted me for a statement, I told him everything. I even forwarded Brielle's Venmo records, which she idiotically left public. Spa treatments, designer clothes, hotel upgrades, all labeled things like chemo recovery or medical retreat. The best part? She'd listed our mother as a co-beneficiary. They both got indicted, publicly. I kept the news articles. I keep them in a folder labeled proof. A month ago, Brielle reached out through a new number. She said she wanted to talk, said she was sorry, said she was in therapy now. I didn't respond. I just blocked her. They called me selfish for leaving, said I turned my back on family. But I finally feel like I can breathe, and that's enough. The silence after the storm didn't last long. At first, I thought maybe they were embarrassed. Maybe the weight of what they did had finally settled in. Maybe they were ashamed, or at least smart enough to leave me alone. But shame has never been in short supply with my family. It just never belongs to the people who deserve it. It started with a letter, handwritten, cursive so tight it looked like it was strangling itself. No return address, but I knew it was from Mom. The second I saw the overly formal way she spelled my name, she called me vindictive, said I'd twisted something beautiful into a public humiliation, that I'd ripped apart the family for attention, and Brielle deserved a second chance. Not one word of accountability. Not a single question about how I was doing. It was signed, "With love, Mom." I didn't respond. Not to that letter. Not to the Facebook friend requests from long-lost cousins. Not to the text messages from Brielle's old friends, asking if I'd really turned her in. As if she was the victim. As if I'd set her up. Then came the knock on my apartment door. It was a Tuesday morning. I'd just gotten out of the shower. My lease was up in 2 months, and I was already planning to move somewhere quiet, somewhere they wouldn't find me. I opened the door a crack. Brielle was standing there. No makeup, no champagne. Just shadows under her eyes and a trembling lip she used to weaponize in high school whenever she wanted to get out of trouble. "Please," she whispered. "Just hear me out." My first instinct was to slam the door, but curiosity, that dangerous, pathetic thing that still lived in my chest, overruled common sense. I let her in. She cried, big, ugly sobs that shook her shoulders. She fell onto my couch like she hadn't planned anything, like her body just gave up halfway through pretending to be human. I didn't say a word. "I panicked," she said. "I was drowning in debt, and no one else would help. I just needed a little bit." I didn't think it would get this far. I stayed silent. She kept going. It got easier, lying to people, saying I was sick. Everyone treated me so gently. I didn't have to try anymore. I didn't even know how to stop. I asked her the only question that mattered: why me? She looked up with tear-glossed eyes and answered like it was obvious. "Because you'd never say no." She was right. For so long, I'd bent until I broke. I made myself small to keep the peace. I gave until there was nothing left of me. And the moment I stopped, they declared war. Brielle begged me to talk to GoFundMe, to the day, to fix it. She said she'd pay me back, swear to God. Said if I dropped the case, the family might forgive me. I laughed so hard I nearly blacked out. Then I told her to get the hell out of my apartment. 2 days later, my landlord called. He sounded confused. Said he got a tip that I was subletting illegally, that someone had filed a complaint about loud parties and drug use. He apologized, but said the company was moving to evict me anyway. I hadn't had a guest in weeks. I didn't even drink. The next week, HR at my job called me in for a routine audit. Someone had emailed screenshots of old social media posts taken wildly out of context, claiming I'd said offensive things about clients. Luckily, our tech guy, the same one who'd helped me find Brielle's travel logs, recognized the formatting. Fake screenshots. Sloppy Photoshop. They didn't work. But the message was clear. My family wasn't going to take the truth lying down. I started locking my phone with multi-factor authentication. I removed my name from every public directory I could think of. When that didn't work, I got a PO box 2 towns over. Then one day, I came home to find my front door slightly open. Nothing was missing, nothing was broken, but my laptop was on, and the folder marked proof was gone. I had backups, of course, encrypted, off-site. But still, I stood there in the hallway, heartbeat like a war drum, realizing that the people who were supposed to love me would rather destroy me than own what they did. That night, I didn't sleep. I paced. I thought about running again, changing my name, leaving the state. But the more I sat with it, the clearer it became. I didn't need to disappear. They did. So I dug deeper. I searched court records, real estate documents, public tax filings. I started connecting dots I'd never bothered to trace before. Turns out, Mom had put several assets in Brielle's name to dodge an old lawsuit. One of those assets? The house they were living in, it wasn't theirs. It was in a trust one. Mom didn't legally control. And the trustee? A distant cousin named Elise, the black sheep of the family, the one Mom had cut off a decade ago over a will dispute. I tracked Elise down. She was living in Oregon, teaching art and drinking herbal tea with a dog named Moose. I emailed her the documents and asked if she had any idea her name was on a trust with $600 worth of property in it. She did not. The next morning she called me, and for the first time in years, someone in my family said the words I didn't know I'd been dying to hear. I believe you. She wasn't just angry, she was furious. Turns out, she'd been pushed out of the family over money she never knew she had a claim to. Together, we made a plan. Not revenge. Not exactly. Just justice with a little dramatic flair. Elise didn't ask me why I was doing this. She didn't need to. She'd seen the photos, the fraud, the fundraiser. She'd read the text my mother sent after the GoFundMe indictment. And she'd lived through her own exile years earlier, cut out of the family like a diseased limb for daring to challenge a will. Your mom's mistake was thinking I'd never come back for what's mine, she said on our second call. The words calm, but taut with electricity. But your sister's mistake was hurting someone smarter than her. I'll admit, it felt good to hear that. Like a warm hand on a frozen spine. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was yelling into a hurricane. I felt heard. And more than that, I felt dangerous. Elise and I worked fast. She hired a real estate attorney in California, someone who specialized in trust disputes. Within a week, a formal audit was opened on the property. The same house my mother had lived in for over a decade. A house she always claimed belonged to the family. A house she'd secretly tried to list for sale twice before, under a shell LLC tied to Brielle's name. She wasn't just a narcissist. She was a criminal with terrible bookkeeping. While Elise's lawyer filed injunctions and froze the trust assets, I played a quieter role. I started gathering receipts. Not literal ones, those I already had, but the kind that scream in text messages, whispered voicemails, emails you're not supposed to see. I pulled every digital trace I could recover. Brielle's travel itineraries, the GoFundMe withdrawals, Venmo transactions with idiotic captions like Paris prep and chemo detox. But what really set fire to the whole thing was the phone backup. My old laptop, the one someone had clearly accessed, still had an auto-sync backup from a year ago. And within that, a gold mine. Brielle had used my phone once on vacation when hers was dead, just for a day. But during that time, it had synced part of her iCloud account to my drive, photos, notes, voice memos. And one memo stood out, emergency story list. It was a script, literally. A script of excuses she'd use if someone questioned her treatment schedule. Things like, my clinic doesn't allow visitors, even family. The meds make me forgetful, so I might say weird things. If I miss a treatment, I'll say it was moved last minute. It was so detailed I almost admired it, until the bile rose in my throat. She'd planned it all, down to how to fake being too weak to walk. She'd even scheduled random hair loss days so she could wear wigs. I wanted to scream, to drive to her place and throw it all at her face. But I didn't. Because revenge, real revenge, doesn't scream. It whispers. The lawyer Elise hired found another interesting detail buried in county archives. The trust had a clause. If the trustee, Elise, proved that any beneficiary had used the property for illegal activity or fraud, she could repossess it immediately. My sister and mother were about to learn what it felt like to be evicted, legally. In the meantime, they kept trying to bait me back in. I started getting anonymous messages on Instagram. Things like family is forever and blood is thicker than betrayal. I knew it was Brielle. Her writing style was about as subtle as a brick to the face. Then came the fake accounts, multiple ones, that began messaging my coworkers, saying I was mentally unstable, that I'd attacked my sister with lies, that I had a history of fabricating trauma. I knew exactly who it was. There was a phrase Brielle always used when she wanted to sound smart, emotionally erratic. One of the fake messages used that exact phrase. Unfortunately for her, one of those coworkers was dating a cybersecurity analyst. We traced the IP, logged the account activity, got proof, and I filed a harassment report with the police, attaching everything. 2 weeks later, Brielle's internet was cut off during an active investigation. She posted from a Starbucks, claiming she was being stalked by a jealous ex. No names, but we all knew. Around the same time, Elise's lawyer sent a formal demand for the property keys, citing the fraud clause. Mom refused. Of course she did. Claimed we were attacking a cancer survivor and a grieving mother. But the trust clause wasn't a request. It was a legal termination. They had 30 days to vacate. That's when the tone of everything changed. The messages stopped. The fake accounts went quiet. For 2 weeks, it was nothing but radio silence. Then, I got a letter in the mail. It wasn't handwritten this time. It was typed, formal, cold. It was from Brielle's attorney. She was filing a civil suit against me for emotional defamation, financial damages, and loss of future income due to character assassination. I read it 3 times. Then I laughed so hard I dropped the letter. She actually thought this was chess. But she was playing checkers with someone who built the board. I scanned the letter, forwarded it to Elise's lawyer, and added a simple note, "Want to handle this, or should I?" He replied with a smiley face and the word, "handled." 2 days later, Brielle's attorney dropped the case. Apparently, once they saw the voice memo, the Venmo records, and the GoFundMe audit, they realized they were representing a fraudster mid-collapse. The final blow came quietly, just as I hoped. Elise served them the eviction in person, with a sheriff, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, while neighbors watched from behind blinds. She told me later that my mom wore a bathrobe and smeared lipstick and said, "This isn't over." Elise smiled and said, "Oh, honey, it's been over for years." They left the house in garbage bags and plastic bins. Brielle posted one last cryptic TikTok, a shaky video of her crying in the passenger seat of a car with the caption, "Everything's falling apart." The comments were brutal. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Sometimes silence is the loudest revenge. They didn't go quietly. Of course they didn't. Mom cried to anyone who would listen, claimed elder abuse, said Elise stole her home in a family coup. She called it a betrayal worse than death. She posted on her Facebook like it was a eulogy, tagging extended family members and quoting Bible verses about honoring thy mother. I watched it unfold from my couch, wine in hand. Every time someone commented in sympathy, Elise calmly replied with legal links and public records. No rage, no drama, just receipts. Brielle, meanwhile, tried the influencer route. She posted selfies in cheap Airbnbs, pretending she was just taking a break from toxic energy. Her captions got more unhinged with each post. Real queens bounce back. Family is who you choose. Not all cancers are in your body. She thought she was clever. But the real hit came weeks later, when GoFundMe finished their fraud investigation. They ruled that not only did she fabricate medical claims, but she also misused funds across state lines, triggering a federal referral. The moment the email hit her inbox, she vanished from social media entirely. Her attorney, a new one, clearly cheaper, tried to negotiate a settlement. He asked if I'd consider restorative mediation, said she was willing to return a portion of the funds if we dropped our statements and closed the case. I didn't even answer. Elise's lawyer responded with a full breakdown of the restitution order, the criminal filings in progress, and a polite reminder that lying to a crowdfunding platform was considered wire fraud. We never heard from him again. Meanwhile, my mother moved into a dingy one-bedroom rental in a retirement complex 3 towns away. She told people she was downsizing by choice, said she needed less space and more peace. I guess that's one way to spin being legally ejected from your stolen home. But the moment that solidified everything, the one that stayed with me, wasn't legal or public. It was private. One night, about a month after the eviction, I got another knock at my door. This time, I looked through the peephole and saw a hunched figure in an oversized coat. Mom. I didn't open it. She stood there for a while, shifting from foot to foot, like she expected me to cave, like I always used to. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was thin, shaky. I raised you better than this. I didn't respond. Not even a breath. You were supposed to be the good one. Still nothing. I'm still your mother. I leaned close to the door and whispered just loud enough to be heard, "No, you're not." And then I turned off the porch light. I thought I might cry after, or shake. But instead, I made tea and played music and felt calm. For the first time in years, the storm wasn't inside me. The fallout didn't stop there. With Brielle's accounts frozen and her digital persona shattered, all the brands she had quietly partnered with, the shady weight loss tea companies, the MLM skincare deals, cut her loose. Some issued public statements. One tagged her name in a press release titled, "We do not support fraud." Even the people who once saw her as the brave warrior unfollowed. You can only lie so long before the applause turns to stones. One night, Elise and I met in person for the first time. We had dinner at a small place near the coast, a halfway point between our cities. She brought Moose, her enormous dog, who instantly tried to crawl into my lap. We talked for hours about family, about trauma, about what it feels like to be the designated scapegoat, the silent support system, the one who never gets picked until they're needed to hold everything together. "You know what pisses me off the most?" Elise said, pouring more wine. "They never even tried to hide it. They just assumed we'd stay quiet forever. They only ever saw what they could take," I said. "Never who we were." We toasted to that. A few days later, I got a package. No return label, but I knew the handwriting. It was from Brielle. Inside, a stack of crumpled photos of us as kids. A charm bracelet I thought I'd lost. And a letter. I almost threw it away unopened. But I didn't. The letter was long, rambling. Half apology, half justification. She said therapy had opened her eyes. That she finally saw the damage. That maybe, just maybe, she was ready to take responsibility. She ended it with a line that almost made me laugh. "If we can't be sisters again, can we at least not be enemies?" I stared at the page for a long time. Then I folded it back up, slipped it into the envelope, and tossed the whole thing into the shredder. Not out of anger, out of finality. Because I wasn't her enemy. I was her consequence. That distinction matters more than people realize. They expect revenge to be this fiery, dramatic thing. A screaming match, a slap, a door slammed so hard it echoes for years. But real revenge? It's the sound of silence after chaos. The peace of a clean apartment. A number no longer saved. A life rebuilt with no room for rot. I moved to a new city 2 months later. Got a better job. Found a therapist who doesn't flinch when I talk about manipulation. I adopted a cat, started sleeping through the night, and found a book club full of women who know exactly what it means to be the strong one until it almost kills you. Brielle and Mom haven't reached out again. Maybe they finally got the message. Or maybe they're just waiting for my guard to slip. But either way, it doesn't matter. Because I'm not that girl anymore. The one who gave until it hurt. The one who bled for people who'd let her drown just to stay afloat a little longer. The one who believed family was a shield instead of a sword. That girl is gone. What's left is quieter, stronger, sharper. The kind of woman who keeps receipts. The kind of woman who knows peace is the sharpest blade of all. You'd think when the smoke clears, you'd feel triumphant, victorious. Like all the pain was worth it. But that's the thing they don't tell you about surviving people like Brielle and my mother. There's no parade, no slow motion walk into the sunset. Just space and silence. And all the things you finally have time to feel now that you're not holding back a dam. The peace came slowly, like rain after a drought. Gentle at first, then all-consuming. I moved into a townhouse with no history. Neutral walls, a quiet neighborhood, and no one who knew my name. I filled it with plants, real ones I remembered to water. I bought new bed sheets that didn't remind me of sleeping on my sister's couch while she rested from chemo. I threw away every candle I'd ever bought her, and I started over. I got a new job in a nonprofit that advocates for survivors of family abuse, the emotional kind, the covert gaslit kind that leaves no bruises, but somehow still breaks bones. My interviewers were 2 women in their 50s who both nodded when I said, "Sometimes being raised by someone doesn't mean they ever saw you." I started attending therapy every other week. I thought it would be about rage, about processing betrayal, but it wasn't. It was grief. Grieving the sister I thought I had, the mother I kept wishing would show up, The version of myself that bent until she snapped, just to keep the people around her comfortable. One session, my therapist said something that cracked something open inside me. I'd been talking about how guilty I still felt, how even after everything, part of me still wondered if I'd gone too far. She said, "You didn't go too far, you just finally stopped going too quietly." That line stayed with me. It changed me. I stopped apologizing in my emails. I stopped over-explaining my boundaries. I stopped taking responsibility for the feelings of people who wouldn't even blink if they shattered mine. I wasn't healed overnight, but I was healing. And then months later, I got the message. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Just one line, "Hey, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but Mom's not doing well. I thought you should know. Brielle." I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I realized how far I'd come. There was a time that message would have unraveled me. A time when I would have dropped everything, driven across the state, sat in a hospital chair beside a woman who wouldn't have crossed the street to spit on me if I was on fire. But not anymore. I didn't respond. I didn't even let it take up space in my chest. I deleted it, blocked the number, took a deep breath, and made tea. She didn't follow up. I knew she wouldn't. Because for the first time in her life, I'd become unpredictable, untouchable, free. A few weeks later, I ran into an old neighbor from the town I left behind. She recognized me at a farmer's market and gasped like she'd seen a ghost. "Oh my God, we all heard what happened. I just want to say, I'm proud of you. I couldn't have done what you did." I smiled politely, unsure what to say. She leaned in and whispered, "We all knew something was off with your mom. We just didn't know how to say it. That's the thing. Most people see it, they just don't speak it. Because naming that kind of darkness out loud makes it real. And once it's real, it's yours to deal with. But I'm not afraid of naming things anymore. Brielle was a fraud, my mother was a manipulator, and I was the collateral damage they didn't expect to lose. But I'm not damaged anymore. I'm scarred, sure, but scarred is just another word for proof you survived. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about forgiveness, wondering if I should send one last message, just to say I've let it go. But I always stop myself, because I haven't forgiven them. Not because I'm bitter, but because forgiveness isn't a currency I owe anyone, not when they've done nothing to earn it. Letting go isn't always about forgiving. Sometimes it's just about releasing the story from your spine so it doesn't binge you anymore. I stopped stalking their profiles. I stopped checking mutual friends' pages. I stopped letting them rent space in my mind. And slowly, so slowly, I started building a life that didn't revolve around surviving someone else's chaos. I met someone new, a quiet man who listens more than he speaks, who doesn't flinch when I set boundaries. We go on long walks. He asks me about my day and actually listens to the answer. He doesn't know the whole story. Not yet. But when he does, I think he'll understand. Some people grow up in families. Others grow up in war zones wearing holiday sweaters. And those of us who make it out, we carry the battlefield inside us for years. But eventually, if we're lucky, we learn to put the weapons down, to stop fighting for people who only ever wanted a punching bag, to breathe, to rest, to live. My story doesn't have a fairy tale ending. There's no reconciliation montage. No teary hug on a front porch. Just me, a woman in her 40s with a cat, a warm bed, a handful of loyal friends, and a sense of self no one can take again. They called me selfish for leaving, said I turned my back on family. But I finally feel like I can breathe. And that's enough. Story 2. For years, I saved money to purchase my first house. For legal reasons, my parents persuaded me to register it in their name. They gave it to my brother as a wedding present. A year later, I refrained from fighting, simply left. I entered the house, anticipating nothing more than a typical family supper. And 6 months later, they kept calling. Earlier that day, I received an SMS from my mom, requesting me to come home from work. "It's been a long time since we last saw you. Let's meet together for supper." After a tough week, I was on the verge of saying no, but something in my habit, duty, or what remained of the me that put my family before myself forced me to say yes. I should have realized there was a problem as soon as I entered. There were balloons and a banner that said, "Daniel and Sophia, congratulations. Sitting at the dining table, nearly beaming, my brother and his fiancée joked with my parents while holding hands. I clutched my purse's strap as I froze. Why all this? When my mother saw me, her expression brightened. Rachel, the time was ideal. I waited for an explanation as I glanced between them. My father got up and gave Daniel a back pat. We have some really important news. Daniel looked up at me with a sly smile, as if I should already know what he was going to say. Suddenly, I felt like my stomach was sinking. With a big smile, my dad declared, "We're giving them the house." The remarks, which were a wedding present, struck me like a punch to the body. I blinked. "What are you?" My mother chuckled as if I hadn't heard them. "It just makes sense, darling. As they begin their lives together, Daniel and Sophia will require a place of their own." I gazed at them, trying to make sense of what was going on. Daniel grinned more broadly. "Crazy, huh?" Sophia was taken aback. Squeezing her hand, he turned to face her. "We had anticipated having to rent for a few years, but now we have a solid place to start our marriage. Consistent? I had saved for the house for years. To pay for it, I had to work 2 jobs, forego holidays, and lead a Spartan lifestyle. And as if it were nothing, they were giving it away. I clenched my throat shut. I lived there. My father sighed, as if I were being challenging. "Technically, it isn't true, Rachel. Legally, it's in our name. When I purchased it, they informed me of this. Rachel, it will shield you from liability. It's only paperwork. There won't be any changes." They had convinced me. I had put my confidence in them. Here I stood now as if I had never been there, watching them give it away. My fingers sank into my purse's strap. I covered the cost. This time, I spoke in a softer tone. Daniel gave an eye roll. "Don't be self-centered, Rach." I jerked my head in his direction. Selfish. I was the self-centered one, and he was taking me home. Sophia, who was seated next to him, smiled at me with a little fake smile while tucking her hair behind her ear. "You're so self-sufficient, Rachel. You'll be all right." Wasn't that always the justification? I was self-sufficient. I had strength. I'd work things out. Daniel, on the other hand, had always required more. More assistance, more support, more of it all. For her, I had to put forth twice as much effort. I glanced at my parents. "Do you truly believe this to be fair?" I got that same reassuring grin from my mother. "It's not for our family, but for the family as a whole." My lips pressed together as his eye released a steady breath. I could engage in combat. What would be the point of yelling? Their name was on the home. They had every legal right to do this, and it was obvious that they had already made up their minds. I then gave a single nod, swallowed my words, and turned to go. I did not pack. I never even made it to my room. I simply turned around, went back outside, and walked away from everything. Give it to them. Let their own decisions sink them. I knew they would regret this one day. They simply weren't aware of it yet. I didn't turn around. I climbed into my vehicle, turned on the ignition, and drove off, holding onto the wheel until my knuckles hurt. I refrained from crying. I refrained from screaming. I didn't even give myself much time to ponder. I might have turned around and demanded that they show me how much they had stolen if I had. However, I was familiar with them. They wouldn't give a damn. Instead, I forced myself to breathe and concentrated on the road while I made the only choice I could. I was left to fend for myself. I hadn't done that before, really. That same evening, I discovered a short-term rental, a small 1-bedroom flat with hardly enough room to move around. It was mine, though. I paid the deposit and the first month's rent the following day, using what little money I had left over. Suddenly, I had a new place to call home. Not the house I had earned, the house I had worked for. However, it served as a sleeping area, a location where I could keep what was rightfully mine. After that, I threw myself into my work. I volunteered for new projects and took on extra shifts. More quickly than ever before, I rose up the corporate ladder, adamant about creating something for myself, something that was unrelated to them. And it was successful. I was promoted 3 months later. It was a race that placed me in a situation I had never encountered before. For the first time in my life, I was comfortable and didn't have to stretch my paycheck to get by. I wasn't paying other people's bills. I owned every dollar I made. And I was doing well. Daniel and my parents, meanwhile, had stopped talking. They hadn't given a call. Instead of checking in, they hadn't texted, not to ask how I was doing. It was as if I had never existed, which should have been fine. I told myself it was fine, but there were little things that kept creeping into my mind. A coworker casually mentioning, "Hey, I saw your mom the other day. She looked a little off." A distant relative messaging me on Facebook asking, "Is everything okay with your family? Your dad seemed really tense last time I saw him." First, I brushed it off. They had gotten exactly what they wanted. They had their perfect plan. A house for Daniel, a future set up exactly the way they wanted it. They were fine, but the first real sign that something wasn't adding up came when I checked social media. One night, Daniel and Sophia had been posting non-stop after they got the house pictures of their new life, their newly furnished home. Posts about how grateful they were, how lucky they were to have such supportive parents. But then suddenly, nothing. Weeks of silence. The last photo was almost a month old. And then I saw it, a new picture of Daniel and Sophia at a restaurant with a caption that made my stomach drop. Crazy how fast things change. There were no details, no explanation, just those words, vague and ominous. I clicked into the comments, scanning for clues. One of Daniel's friends had commented, "Damn, man. Hope everything works out." Another, "You guys are strong. You'll bounce back." Bounce back from what? I put my phone down, my heart pounding in my ears. Something was wrong, but I wasn't going to be the one to ask. They had cut me out. They had treated me like I was irrelevant. Let them deal with whatever was happening. Then a week later, my mom called. I stared at my phone as it rang, her name flashing across the screen. I didn't respond. An hour later, she called again. And then again, I let them all go to voicemail. The next morning, my dad tried, then Daniel. One by one, they were all trying to reach me. And still I ignored them. Until finally, I got a text that made me pause. From Daniel. "Daniel, I know you're pissed, but we need to talk. It's important." I read it twice, my fingers hovering over the screen. Daniel had never been the one to reach out first. He was too proud, too entitled to admit when he needed something. Which meant something was seriously wrong. I took a deep breath and typed out my reply. "Me? Why?" A few minutes passed before the response came. "Daniel, just come home. Please." I stared at those words. Come home like I had a home to go back to, like they hadn't taken it from me. I didn't respond. But for the first time since I left, I couldn't shake the feeling that their perfect little plan was falling apart, and I had no idea what was waiting for me on the other side. I didn't go to them right away. Even after Daniel's text, after the calls kept piling up, after my mother left me voicemail after voicemail and that soft, pleading tone she used when she wanted something, I stayed silent for 6 months. They had acted like I didn't exist. Now, suddenly I was the first person they thought of. I didn't believe for a second that it was about making things right. They needed something, and I wasn't going to make it easy for them. But after 3 more days of constant messages, my curiosity got the better of me. I drove back to the house. Not because I missed it, not because I wanted to talk, but because I needed to see what exactly had gone wrong. The second I pulled up to the driveway, I knew it was bad. The lawn, which had always been perfectly maintained, was overgrown and patchy. The curtains inside were drawn shut, making the place look empty, lifeless, and the biggest sign of all, a bright orange foreclosure notice taped to the front door. I didn't even have time to process it before the door swung open and my mother rushed out. Rachel. She had changed appearance. Her hair wasn't done, her clothes were wrinkled, and there were dark circles under her eyes, like she hadn't been sleeping. She grabbed my arm like she thought I was about to run. "Sweetheart, we were just about to call again. Thank God you're here." I drew away. "What's going on?" She paused, but before she could speak, my dad went outside to massaging his forehead like he had the worst headache of his life. "We need your aid," he whispered. I folded my arms. "With what?" My mom stared at my dad, then at Daniel, who had just stepped in the doorway behind them. Arms crossed, appearing unhappy. Like this was uncomfortable for him, like I was the problem. I narrowed my eyes. Someone explained. My mom sighed, wringing her hands together. "It's the mortgage, Rachel." I gazed at her. "The bank is threatening foreclosure," she said quietly. "We're late on payments." I let the words sink in. Slowly, slowly. I gave a hollow laugh after that. I mentioned I never missed a payment. My father turned his head away. I looked across at Daniel. "How far behind do you stand?" He clenched his jaw. I'm not to blame. I arched an eyebrow. Really? Because you were the one residing here the last time I looked. He balled his hands up. We simply slipped further behind. The bank is going overboard. I crossed my arms. How far behind Daniel is he? A lengthy quiet. My mum cleared her throat after that. 5 months. My stomach dropped. 5 months? That was more than a slight lag. Losing the house entirely was just one step away. Slowly, as I put everything together, I let out a breath. Daniel has lost the mortgage payments due to gambling. For years, I had been aware of his habit. It began with occasional small-scale sports betting, a game of poker with companions. Then it became larger, more dangerous. I always thought our parents took care of him, but now that he had burnt through everything and acquired a house in his name, they were in a hurry. We need your assistance, my mother said in a hurried tone. I cocked my head. Why would I do that too? She blinked. This is also your home, Rachel. I laughed a little, without humor. It's funny since you told me I could find another apartment 6 months ago. My father sighed, as if I were being challenging. Look, we made a mistake, but all we need is for the bank to accept the house. All you need is me. Silently, I cut. We all knew that was true, so none of them argued. I wasn't the most popular. They had lived their entire lives making excuses for a child who wasn't me. However, I was the one in charge, the one who always made things right, and they assumed that, as usual, I would quickly clean up their mess. I looked back at the door's foreclosure notice. The house would be taken by the bank in a matter of weeks if I left now. However, I was meant to own this house, and perhaps I might be able to make that true once more. I glanced at Daniel. What is your debt? In relief, his shoulders slumped. We required just over $18,000. That seemed like a lot, so I nodded. However, I could pay for it with my promotion and savings in a planned strategy, but not for them. Not for nothing. I folded my arms. I'll cover the cost. With a gasp, my mother clapped her hands together. We knew we could rely on you, my dear. However, I have health issues. I cut you off, my father scowled. Rachel, I extended a hand. You're not allowed to debate. They all became quiet. I inhaled slowly while ensuring that my voice was firm and quiet. This house belongs to me if I'm paying off your debt, Mom blinked. What? You'll sell it to me officially. For cheap, I said. A little portion of its value. A wave of shock passed through them. Anger distorted Daniel's face. Are you attempting to take my house? I cocked my head. Your home? The one you were unable to afford. He started to say something, but my dad interrupted him. That's unfair, Rachel. I looked over at him. The fact that I paid for this property makes it unfair, and you distributed it as if it were a toy. I knew I had him pushed into a corner when he squeezed his lips together. There was nothing else they could do. The bank was just a few days away from seizing the house. They lacked funds, alternatives, and a contingency plan, and the only one who could save them was me. My mother's face became white. Would you actually do this? I stared at her. Indeed. A lengthy quiet. Finally, my dad rubbed his brow and let out a breath. All right, he whispered. We will sign the documents. I ignored my heart's pounding in my chest and nodded. I was not done yet, but I had one. They were going to regret ever taking this house from me once everything was official, and I had one final thing to do. I refrained from celebrating until all of the papers were signed. Not until the deed had my name on it. Not until all legal documents were completed, notarized, and processed. I had no faith in them. Since I had been the one in charge for years, I was unable to. The one who solved problems and was always willing to help, and they had taken advantage of that. Therefore, the first made sure there were no last-minute alterations, ambiguous promises, or gaps. 2 weeks later, the house was once again legally mine. They had previously informed me at the dining table, where I sat across from them. They had given Daniel all I had labored for, so I had to locate another location, the same table, and slip a folded note to him. Daniel picked it up and scowled. What is this? I reclined in my seat. Your notice of 1 month's eviction? There was silence in the room. Daniel then shook his head and chuckled. You're kidding. I cocked my head. Do I appear to be kidding? His smirk faded as he glanced over the message. You're not serious. You promised to assist us. I grinned. And I did. I settled your loan. I prevented the house from being taken by the bank. Daniel the first purchased the house. I gave the table a tap. This indicates that you no longer reside here. With a gasp, my mom grabbed the letter. Rachel, my dear, we never do. What do you never do? Asked in a calm voice. Intended to return my home to me. He took a swallow. We simply expected that I would provide Daniel and Sophia a rent-free stay indefinitely. I laughed a little without humor. No, not at all. Sophia, who had been silent all along, eventually broke the silence. She spoke in a shrill, frantic tone. Where are we going to go, Rachel? I arched an eyebrow. I'm not sure. Perhaps you're giving. You will be adopted by your in-laws. I went to my parents. I'm confident you won't mind welcoming Daniel into your home because you felt he was more deserving of it than I was. My father's expression worsened. This is low, Rachel. I looked him in the eye. No, it was low of him to take my house. This is only fixing an error. The letter was smashed upon the table by Daniel. This is not possible. I remained sitting, gazing up at him with composure. I did, and I can. My mom's tone faltered. Rachel, we're family. We don't treat one another like way. I looked at her for a while. I then pressed my hands against the table and leaned forward. Families don't treat me the way you did. She winced. I straightened my back over my shoulder and stood. I told you that you had 4 weeks to vacate. I advise you to begin packing right now. I left after saying that. They made every effort to get me to reconsider during the course of the following month. Daniel and Sophia took turns pleading with me and frightening me. They had nowhere else to go. Sophia said me over the phone in tears. Daniel sent me irate texts accusing me of destroying his life. My parents begged me not to penalize them over a miscommunication, saying it wasn't fair. I didn't respond though. Not once. I'd done enough for them enough. And I drove back to see if they had left on the last day of their eviction notice. Moving boxes filled the driveway when I pulled up. By their car, Daniel and Sophia were fighting. Sophia wiped away tears of rage, as well as my parents. Now that they had no other option, they were assisting them in loading their belongings. They were going to move in with Daniel and Sophia. My voice was soft as I rolled down my window. Everything is packed. Daniel's cheeks flushed with anger. You realize that you're a tremendous piece of work? I grinned. You're also a bad renter. I suppose this is a lesson day for both of us. My mother gave me a beseeching look. Please don't do this, Rachel. I couldn't interpret her face. Remember how you said I would find another place? She took a deep breath. After parking my car, I walked to the porch. Once more, the porch that was mine. You made a decision. I crossed my arms as I spoke. You have to live with it now. As she dragged her final bag to the car, Sophia grumbled something to herself. There was nothing Daniel could do, so he stood there and glared at me as if he wanted to smash a hole in the wall. I was staying, and they were going. I eventually entered my home and closed the door after entering. This could never be taken away from me again. Story 3. After selling my wedding dress in secret the day before my wedding and spending the proceeds on a lavish vacation with her lover, my sister said, "We needed the money more than you needed the dress." However, her life would soon change irrevocably. In all my life, I had never possessed anything so exquisite. I had a surge of exhilaration and a type of euphoria that I wasn't used to every time I glanced at it. It was the ideal dress. It was more than lace and cloth. It was evidence that I had at last taken care of myself. I didn't like to spend a lot of money. I was responsible and realistic. Bills had been paid with every paycheck I received. Groceries, rent, and tuition for my sister. But I had given myself permission to do something unique for the first time, just this once. And I would wear it at last tomorrow. My wedding day was almost here, and I still couldn't believe it. I was getting married. I was the girl who had worked 2 jobs for the majority of her 20s and was too preoccupied with seeing to her sister's needs to give any thought to relationships. Nevertheless, I had managed to locate him amidst everything. A guy who never wanted me to be less or to sacrifice parts of myself for his comfort, and who not only loved, but also appreciated me. And I wanted to feel like a bride when I went down the aisle tomorrow. Not only a big sister or a carer, not only someone who always gave up something for everyone else. When I put on that outfit, I knew I would have the one ideal moment I had been waiting for. I smiled to myself as I looked towards my closet. already imagining the beautiful embroidery and the way the cloth glistened in the light. Just to make sure, I had checked on it 100 times this week. Now singing to myself, my heart so light it seemed almost foolish, I walked over. The best day of my life was going to be tomorrow. My smile stopped when I opened the wardrobe door. For a moment, the dress was gone. I simply stood there and gazed at the blank room. What I was witnessing was too much for my brain to grasp. I pulled the other hangers aside, blinked, and gave a little shake of my head. I might have relocated it. Perhaps I was simply misremembering. I fell to my knees and rubbed my hands on the wardrobe floor. Perhaps it had dropped, but no, nothing was present. Panic struck suddenly, hot and overpowering. My breath came sharply and quickly. No. I completely flipped the bedroom over. I looked in the kitchen, the laundry basket, and the closet in the hallway, because perhaps the first made a foolish mistake. Perhaps I left it somewhere absurd since I was sleep-deprived. However, I already knew in my heart that this was not an error. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone and nearly dropped it. I phoned Lisa after scrolling down to her name. Our lives would be irrevocably altered by what followed. The favorite was always Lisa. At first, it wasn't clear. My parents didn't actually say it aloud. However, something is true even if you don't state it. The small things, like having to give her my toys even though they were birthday presents, were the source of it. Joanna, you're the big sister. Be kind. Or how she could obtain precisely what she wanted by having a tantrum in a store. However, my parents would remark, if I even made a suggestion, that I desired anything. Joanna, we can't afford that. Avoid becoming self-centered. I found very early that Lisa got what she desired. But it was about more than possessions. It has to do with attentiveness. Lisa was the type of kid that everybody liked. Her reactions were loud, her smiles were brilliant, and her tears were large. She made sure everyone knew when she was joyful. She made sure everyone knew when she was unhappy. That wasn't me. I kept silent. I didn't share anything. I didn't cry over little matters. Didn't have tantrums. I was unhappy over something. I handled it. Additionally, my parents encouraged me to be self-sufficient while rewarding Lisa for her need. You're really grown up for your age, Joanna. You don't require assistance with that, Joanna, do you? Right now, Lisa just needs a bit more care. Now, who's constantly in the moment? I used to wonder when my moment would arrive. He didn't. Everything revolved around Lisa's troubles after she began school. She didn't do well in school. She required more assistance, was often sidetracked, and missed tasks. Our parents gave their time to tutor her, attend parent-teacher conferences, and assist her with her schoolwork. In contrast, I received consecutive A's. I completed my assignment on my own initiative. Lisa needed them more than I ever did, so they stopped listening. My parents seldom looked at my excellent results on the examinations I brought home. They applauded Lisa as though she had won a gold medal when she received a B on a maths test. I remained silent. What might be said? I became less tolerant. College followed. I knew all along that I was not going. Nobody had ever talked about saving money for me, and we didn't have it. I didn't voice any complaints. I didn't inquire. After graduating from high school, I found employment. That's how I went. Up till 2 years later, it was anticipated. I heard my folks discussing Lisa's college money. I have a clear memory of the incident. I had entered the kitchen just now. At the table, my mother was looking through university brochures. We must begin searching for flats close to the university. She told my dad that Lisa would require a comfortable home to reside. I remained still. I wasn't rescued for by them. They hadn't even thought about it. However, Lisa had a full scheme, rent and tuition, a new beginning in a different state. In the entryway, they noticed me. Mom grinned. Could you assist Lisa choose some furniture for her dorm room, Joanna? You're quite realistic. You will realize what is worthwhile purchasing. As if I were only a worker. For example, my sole responsibility was to assist Lisa. I refrained from arguing, said nothing because, what was the purpose? Lisa was worthy of a future. It was only me that ensured she had it. The following several years were spent laboring in agony. Lisa became an easygoing college student. I occasionally had 3 jobs. I covered emergencies, sent her money for groceries, and paid her rent. My parents generally told me, although they did help when they could, Joanna, you're doing great for yourself. you don't require our assistance. Because Lisa's job was to require support and taking care of matters. I owned that. I didn't question it, not even when Lisa began to have higher expectations. She needed money for more than simply tuition. She needed funds for weekend vacations, spring break excursions, and concerts. And because she was my baby sister, I adored her and gave it to her. For who else would look after her? Then came the turning point in everything. One night, Lisa contacted me in a panic. "I have to borrow some cash, Joe. Please. It's quite significant." I begged for a getaway even though I was worn out after working 2 shifts. As if she didn't want my lover to hear her, she was whispering, "This excursion is necessary. He could leave me if we don't do this." And things have been pretty tough. I felt sick to my stomach because of the way she stated it. Lisa was someone I knew. She didn't plead. I also didn't trust her guy because I knew enough about him. He was still my sister, though. I inquired as to how much she had informed me, and I said no for the first time in my life. It wasn't warmly received by her. She sobbed. I was informed that this was her final opportunity to mend her relationship. "Joe, please, you always come to my aid. What makes this unique?" I also desired to. God, I really wanted to, but I was unable to. Not now. So I said I was sorry. I informed her that I couldn't. Lisa fell quiet. Her next statement caused my chest to constrict. "Oh, that's all." It was as if she was now understanding that she couldn't simply whisk me away forever. The call was cut off. I pondered whether I had just wrecked everything as I sat there looking at my phone. However, I was clueless, because the true betrayal was on the horizon, and I was the one who didn't anticipate it this time. I was still under the impression that Lisa was my maid of honor the night before my wedding. She stayed at my flat and helped me with last-minute tasks like putting on my shoes, steaming the veil, and making sure I had everything I needed to bring to the event. While we sat on my bed and laughed over our early years, she even braided my hair. "Are you getting married?" At one time, as if she was still in shock, she whispered. Warm, optimistic, and delighted, I grinned. In spite of everything, I wanted Lisa at my side on my special day, because I loved her since she was my sister, even if she had been selfish at times and had recently become irritable about money. The following morning, Lisa rose early. When she said she was running errands, I was still drowsy. Incoherently, she said, "Before the wedding, I have a few things to finish." I gave a nod, too exhausted to inquire. He gave me a cheek kiss. "I will return shortly." All right. I rolled over and muttered. I ought to have known. I was giddy with anxiety by the time I woke up. I had hardly slept at all. It was this. The day of my wedding. After making coffee, taking a shower, and taking a big breath, I went to my closet. Before I got dressed, I wanted to take one more look at the outfit. I yanked the wardrobe door open. My heart stopped beating. The garment was gone. Initially, I stood still. My head isn't keeping up. However, I had to be present. I must have been. I shoved hangers aside, wrenched the closet door further, and peered at the floor. Nothing. My breath caught. I had trembling hands. I disassembled my bedroom and looked in the laundry basket and the closet in the hallway. I packed this luggage for the honeymoon. Despite my knowledge that it wouldn't be present, it had vanished. I felt panic rising in my throat. Reaching for my phone, I called Lisa. On the first ring, she responded. "Joe, hello. I'll be back soon." "Lisa," I interrupted her. I sounded dangerously quiet. "Where's my dress?" A little quiet. Then she chuckled. "God, you frightened me." I genuinely believed that something was amiss. I closed my eyes tightly. "The outfit is gone, Lisa. What location is it?" "I'm not sure." "Have you looked into the laundry room?" "I looked everywhere. It could have been taken." Her voice provided, a little informal. "Yesterday, your buddy Emily was present. She could have relocated it." At the time, I sensed it. The change in my abdomen. Knowing she was lying, that silence was terrible. After an hour, Lisa returned. She entered as if nothing had happened. However, her grin vanished when she noticed my face and the way I was gazing at her. "Lisa," I said, "be honest with me." After hesitating, she rolled her eyes and let out a loud groan. "All okay. All right." Then she said the words that would live indelibly in my mind. "You didn't need the outfit as much as we did." I remained silent. I was unable to. As if I were the one acting irrationally, she crossed her arms. Take a look, she went on. The love of your life is getting married to you. He won't abandon you because of a dress. I balled my hands into fists. It was sold by you. As if it were the most sensible thing in the world, she nodded. In fact, weeks ago, I found a buyer. Do you recall when you uploaded that image? I received a message asking if he would sell it. They immediately sent the deposit after I said yes. I was out of breath for weeks. She spent weeks organizing this. Didn't you think to let me know? She laughed. I told you I had to take that trip, Joanna. I have a relationship at stake. You're content already. Everything is already yours. You didn't need this as much as I did. I had an internal sensation. Hurry up. Lisa had gotten everything from me. My future, my money, my time, and my energy. Additionally, she had taken the one item that was exclusively mine. I inhaled deeply. I then gave her a direct look. My maid of honor is no longer you. Lisa's expression contorted. What? Leave now! My voice trembled as I spoke. You're not allowed to attend my wedding. Her jaw dropped. Joanna, leave now! I didn't shout. She stepped back for the first time when she noticed something in my face, but I didn't scream. Lisa panicked after realizing she had overreached herself. Don't be like this, please, she pleaded. It's only a dress. I wasn't listening, though. I was finished. She laughed, and I fell apart. My maid of honor has changed. My best friend Emily stepped in at the last minute. I found a replacement dress. She said it didn't fit right. It didn't feel like mine. There was no time to tailor it. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger in a white dress. The wedding went on, but the moment I stepped down the aisle, Lisa tried to force her way in. I had told security to not let her in, but she made a scene. People turned, guests started whispering, and I knew if I kept fighting her now, she would ruin everything. So I let her in as a guest, not as my maid of honor, not as my sister, not as the person I had spent years sacrificing for. And as I stood at the altar smiling for the cameras, I thought, she thinks she got away with this. She has no idea how much she's going to regret it. I didn't yell at her. I didn't scream or threaten or tell her exactly how much I hated her in that moment. It is smiled. I let her walk into my wedding like she hadn't ruined it the day before. Let her sip champagne, laugh with guests, take pictures as if she was still my sister. She thought she had gotten away with it, but Lisa had no idea because I wasn't going to fight her. I was going to let her destroy herself. 1 week later, Lisa went on her trip like nothing had happened. She posted pictures laughing on a boat, drinking fancy cocktails, posing in a swimsuit next to her boyfriend. There was no guilt, no shame, just Lisa enjoying the trip she had stolen from me. I saved every single picture, not because I cared what she was doing, but because one day I wanted her to look back at them and remember how blissfully unaware she was, how she had no idea that by the time she came home, her entire life would be falling apart. The first thing to go was her phone bill. It was a small thing, something she never thought about because I had always handled it. He texted me casually like everything was normal. Lisa, hey, my phone bill is due. Can you send a payment? I stared at the message for a long time. Then I put my phone down. I didn't respond. I didn't pay. I let her figure it out. A few days later, she texted again. Lisa, Joe, I think my service got turned off. Did you forget to pay? This time I grinned. Please, you have no idea. Next it was rent. She had 1 more week until it was due, but I wasn't saying a thing. I wondered how long it would take her to realize no one was covering it. I didn't have to wait long. She called me late at night, her voice high-pitched and anxious. Joanna, my landlord, just messaged me about rent. I guess the auto pay didn't go through. I took a while to respond. I let the stillness to linger. Then I said quietly, I'm not going to pay for it. It seemed as though she hadn't really comprehended the words. What? I said again, I'm not paying. No more. Lisa genuinely chuckled. A little incredulous, breathy sound. All right. Very amusing. But can you really cure it? Right now, I don't have enough money in my account. I remained silent. She had yet to receive the punchline. Something must have snapped in my quiet then. Her voice changed. Hold on, Joe. Why not anymore? What do you mean? Feeling lighter than I have in years, I reclined in my chair. I'm finished. Lisa, I've finished covering your tuition, bills, vacations, and rent. Quiet. This time, there was a new type of silence. Not misunderstanding. Fear. Hold on. Hold on. Joe, you're angry. I understand, however. You can't just though. I can, I said. Her breath caught. However, I still have a year of college left. You promised to cover it. I had planned to. Before you sold my wedding gown, I said. I could almost hear her thoughts racing. This was the first time I had done it. Never let her go. Never refused her. She continued, her voice cracking a little. Joe, please. I ended the call when she returned home from her trip 2 weeks later and began to discover the full extent of the devastation. That's when the true desperation set in. Her college tuition is still outstanding. Her landlord is trying to evict her, and the phone is still unpaid. She was only a semester away. For the first time in her life, no one was rushing to her aid as the tuition deadline approached. The actual call began at that point. Not the cries, the begging, the innocuous reminders. Lisa, please, Joe, give me a call back, please. Lisa, I mean it. I'm at a loss on what to do. Lisa, I promise to reimburse you. Right now, I just need assistance. Lisa, please, Joanna. Your sister is me. My sister wasn't her. She was only a girl who had taken advantage of me all her life. No. She was now suffering the consequences. At 2 a.m., the last call was made. I was going to turn down the call when I woke up sluggish and fumbled for my phone, but something forced me to answer. Lisa was crying. They're throwing me out, Joe. She let out a gasp. I don't. There is nowhere for me to go. I took a seat. It's not my issue. Her breath caught. Please, Joe. I'll reimburse you. I promise. I'll do anything. Do you mean the way you reimbursed me for my wedding gown? Quiet. Then a whisper broke. I never imagined that you would truly harm me in this way. I shut my eyes. I didn't anticipate that you would sell my dress, I said. And yet, here we are. More pleading, more weeping. She sounded more desperate than I had ever heard her. I nearly felt guilty. Nearly. Then I considered everything. The years I sacrificed, the money I earned, the way she'd grinned at me, pretending that her actions were inconsequential. I didn't matter to her. What I could offer her was important to her. She had nothing now. I inhaled deeply. I then told her no for the first time in my life. Lisa, go your own way. I hung up after that. The following day, I didn't check my phone. I ignored the messages she sent me. For the first time, I left my life. I owned my money. I had my own time. I'm not sure what happened to Lisa either. I have no idea where she went or how she managed to escape the wreckage she created. However, I am certain that she will never take anything from me again. Update. Lisa was on her way to our folks in no time. She contacted them in tears and said I had interrupted her, left her behind. When she was unable to sustain herself, they abandoned her to suffer. Naturally, they sided with her. I had no idea what they thought. That overnight, I turned into a jerk. That I decided to wreck my sister's life for fun one morning after waking up. The next thing I know, they were phoning, so it didn't matter. It started with my mother, Joanna. We didn't raise you like this, and I'm not sure what's gotten into you. Next, my father. She's your sister. Family members support one another. You were everything she was depending on. Then the guilt trips. She will be without a place to live. Are you truly comfortable with that? It will be necessary for her to leave school. Would you like to bear the blame for destroying her future? I gave them space to speak. Let them give me a lesson. Disgrace me. Try to force me to return to my previous position. When they eventually stopped, I said in a composed manner, Did she explain to you why I no longer had to pay for her? Quiet. Next, my mother's side. As if I were the irrational one. Joanna, it was only a gown, only a dress. My wedding gown. The one item I've ever desired for myself. And it meant nothing to them. I let out a breath. I then filled them in on everything. Every sacrifice. I always prioritized Lisa. I paid all of the bills. I paid for each meal. I gave up every dream I had so she may have hers. I explained everything. Then I concluded. Her sister wasn't me. Her bank account was me. I'm finished now. That didn't sit well with them. They attempted to quarrel, said that I was being harsh, nasty, and self-centered. However, I had already decided. I ended the call, and I didn't answer any calls for the following 3 months. Lisa believed she could get by without me. She continued to act as though nothing was wrong for a time. The outfit had left her with some funds. She believed she would be able to solve it. Then reality set in. Her final year's tuition was unpaid. Her phone remained disconnected. She still hadn't paid her rent. Slowly, she was drowning. Her lover left her because of this, which made matters worse. He did, of course. She had never been his love. He cherished what she had to offer. She was now at a loss for what to offer. He then turned to go. Lisa. It was Lisa's first time having to work. She didn't know how difficult it was to earn money, and she didn't have any job experience. But there was nothing she could do. She thus secured a part-time position at a coffee shop. Her rent was barely covered. She was always worn out. She had never before balanced employment and study. Ultimately, she was unable to keep up. She didn't pass any of her tests. She went back home with our parents after losing her job and being evicted, and they put the blame on me when it occurred. Joanna, you destroyed your sister's life. If you had just assisted her as previously, all of this would not have occurred. Do you no longer give a damn about family? I had nothing further to say, so I didn't answer. Update. I hadn't spoken to Lisa for more than a year after that. My parents too. And I had the best life ever. It was the first time I had money of my own. My second job had been quit. I took trips and made purchases for myself. I was expecting a child and happily married. Everything for which I had spent so many years striving. For the first time, I was enjoying it. Then one day, without warning, Lisa got in touch. He texted me. Lisa, hey, can we get coffee? I know it's been a while since we spoke. I spent a lot of time looking at the screen. After a few minutes, I responded, not knowing what she wanted. Me? All right. She and I met at a little cafe close to my house. She had changed appearance, older and exhausted in some way. After we ordered drinks and sat down, she said something that caught me off guard. Now I understand. I blinked. What? He took a swallow, appeared uneasy. Back then, I had no idea how difficult and draining it is to work and pay for everything. To feel as though there is never enough. However, I assumed you did it purely out of desire. I had no idea how much you were sacrificing. She lowered her gaze to her hands. I treated you horribly. There was nothing to say, so I remained silent. She let out a sigh. I'm not requesting anything. I simply, you are missed. I want to try, even though I know I don't deserve another opportunity. I'm not in need of your cash. I have no expectations of you. All I want is for my sister to return. I let out a breath. I had fantasized of hearing those words a year ago. In any case, I wasn't sure if I could trust them. I gave her a glance. Observe her closely. She had endured a lot. It was a horror she had made for herself. Additionally, she could have altered. However, I would never again allow myself to be used. At last, I said something. I'm willing to attempt to forgive you, even though I'm not sure I can. She started crying. All I'm asking is that. We spent an hour discussing unimportant topics. She made no requests for the first time, and I smiled a little at her as we walked away. Perhaps, just possibly, it could be. Not because everything was okay.